At the beginning of this page, we have a giant headline: Lost Lum and Abner Motion Picture Found. The most unusual Lum and Abner film of all time, Plan Fine from Outer Space, was released to small-town theaters and drive-ins during the summer of 1950. So obscure is the film that only one printed discussion has surfaced. On a break from their appearance at the 1971 NostalgiaCon in St. Louis, Chet Locke, Norris Goff, Roswell Rogers, and Clarence Hartzell were coaxed into reminiscing about the motion picture that never seems to appear on any Lum and Abner filmographies. The following is reprinted from the article The Lost Lum and Abner Film and the Men Who Hope It Stays That Way, from NostalgiaCon News, September 1971. Many thanks to NLAS members Mark Baisden and Martine Martinez for locating a copy of this obscure magazine recently at the massive monthly flea market in Canton, Texas.
We contracted with a man named Woodrow Edwards,
Chet Locke recalled,
and I remember joking that any Edwards boy would be a good man to do business with. We finished up on CBS in 1950, and we were on hiatus from radio, so it seemed a good time to try another film. We formed our own production company, and away we went.
When asked about the reunion of the characters Lum and Abner with that of Ben Withers, who had been absent from the radio series for a short time, Clarence Hartzell quietly explained,
I needed the money, and Roz was kind enough to suggest writing my character of Ben Withers into the final script.
If you've never heard the character,
Rogers broke in,
Ben Withers often answered any question with the word fine, and he said it in such a way that it was hilarious.
Tuffy Goff urged.
Say it, Clarence.
Fine,
chirped Hartzell to the delight of the other men seated in the semi-dark green room of the NostalgiaCon's rented facility, the Braswell Hilton's E. Nelson Slainit Convention Center. When asked why the film played for so short a time, Goff quickly answered,
It was a piece of junk.
After the laughter subsided, he explained,
Seriously, that was one of the worst pictures we ever did. I mean, the concept was all right. We'd done a rocket ship thing before on radio, or maybe in a film. I don't remember for sure. And we had Roz writing it, so it should have been great. The director was an odd duck,
Locke grumbled.
I don't think Woodrow or Woody Edwards was his real name. Seems as if I heard he went by a different name later and kept making really bad pictures.
Goff asked of Locke,
Didn't he use John Carradine or one of those old Dracula actors in some other pictures? I'm not sure.
Locke replied, continuing,
But I know he told me he'd wanted to make a picture with me ever since he saw me wearing a dress and going to town.
Everyone enjoyed a hearty laugh, after which Roz Rogers said,
I have to admit it was not my best script either, so we can't blame it all on Woody or whatever his name was. I came up with a nutty idea that Ben Withers was receiving messages from outer space. I think it was the planet Pluto.
Yeah, dogs,
interjected Goff.
That was it. Ben Withers was a veterinarian, remember? Weren't dogs talking to him?
No, Tuffy,
Roz replied with an almost condescending tone.
Disney would have sued our pants off. No, they were just normal aliens, and supposedly they contacted Ben on his shortwave radio, and they had this plan for him to fly to their planet for some silly reason. Maybe they thought he was the smartest man on Earth. But that's why we had the title, Plan Fine from Outer Space.
That title sure seems familiar to me,
Locke mumbled. Hartzell added,
Well, you know, there were a lot of really strange science fiction films in the 1950s, but in a way I think we were a little ahead of our time.
Goff remembered,
You know, the budget was so low that we had an old Pine Ridge friend, Dick Huddleston, round up some local guys to do the music. Remember that? You're right, Tough.
Chet replied.
He had these fellers like Reuel Bain and Ezra Buzzington, guys that he used to tour with. They were kind of scattered by then, but 2 or 3 states came together in the process, and they recorded some authentic mountain music for the score. We rented the KENA radio station in Mena, and some young DJ named Dwight Douglas recorded the music.
Rogers laughed and said,
that backfired.
because the soundtrack was more like a hoedown, and at the theaters and drive-ins in the small rural towns, the audience started dancing and ignored the movie. That's what we wanted them to do.
Goff shouted to the delight of everyone. The gentleman could remember very little about the film itself outside of watching Woody Edwards and his crew filming special effects footage. Roz Rogers explained,
They took an old Hoover vacuum cleaner, stuck some fireworks sparklers in the end, dangled it on a wire using a fishing pole, and shot it with the skyline of Los Angeles in the background.
That wasn't L.A.
Locke corrected.
We shot all of it in Arkansas, remember?
It was either Hot Springs or Mena.
Goff added. Rogers agreed.
That's right. I thought we did those shots before we left California, but maybe not. Anyway, another time they actually tried propelling the Hoover with some kind of explosive, and that thing blew into 1,000,000 pieces. They tried to send Clarence to a junkyard to find another worthless old Hoover, but do you remember what you said, Clarence? No, but I'm sure it wasn't fine that time.
Rogers wouldn't repeat the soft-spoken Hartzell's long-ago comments, and little else came to mind about the production of the film. But what happened? Why did it vanish? Chet Locke finally broke the silence.
The Hoover people threatened to sue us. That's why. Some of their salesmen saw one of the products pretending to be a rocket ship blowing out sparks and all, and they came after us.
That crazy director bailed out on us.
Goff recalled.
And since Chet and I were essentially the production company and held the copyright, we were held responsible, so we agreed to pull it from release and hand them all the profits. Ordinarily we would have, but there was only one little problem. There never were any profits.
NostalgiaCon staffers searched for months prior to the 1971 event in an attempt to find a copy of this film, but it is believed the few remaining prints were stored in the projection booth of the Night Owl Drive-In Theater in Llewellyn, Iowa. Archibald Snavely, a former Llewellyn resident and current NostalgiaCon staffer, recalled for us,
I was a kid in the mid to late 1950s, and I remember the Night Owl used to give away strips of old movie film for kids to use as kite tails or hair ribbons or belts or to clip onto your bikes to make noise when it flapped against your spokes. My Uncle Ivan used to cut it up for mandolin picks. It was also good to fold over a few times to look through to see an eclipse. Families would use it as ribbon to wrap Christmas packages. I used to have yards of it, and once I remember looking at it through a magnifying glass, and I saw these three old guys on some frames, and I thought they were selling Hoover vacuums. Then, one day in the 1960s, my cousins parked their old clunker pickup too close to the projection building. They had gone there to see some cheap movie called Hocus Pocus or Weird World or one of those bottom-of-the-barrel science fiction things that all seemed to star John Agar. One of them tossed a cigarette butt into the bed of the pickup where he had cans of gasoline, and needless to say, the grand old Night Owl went up in a blaze that night. Later in the rubble we found some burnt, warped old film reels back where their storage area had been. I just wonder if that may have been what was left of the lost film. I wish I still had those strips.
Locke, Goff, Rogers, and Hartzell seemed perfectly content that the movie may be lost forever. However, one thing is certain. With a title like Plan Fine from Outer Space, the film certainly could not be the worst motion picture ever made. Signed, Ratzenschlappler, NostalgiaCon News, September 1971. And at the bottom of this page, in very, very small font, it says, Psst! If you're still reading, April Fool. And yes, this was our April Fool's Day joke. I had a lot of fun writing that. At the top of it, we have a simulated lobby card, which depicts Lum, Abner, and Ben Withers in spacesuit garb. This was actually taken from different images and composited. and we have it appearing as if these three gentlemen are in the foreground, with Ben Withers just behind them, all in their space helmets. Ben is smiling, and it's actually a photograph of Clarence Hartzell from his days of portraying Uncle Fletcher on the classic Vic and Sade radio show. In the background, we see the spaceship from 2 Weeks to Live, which actually does look something like a Hoover vacuum cleaner. We see airport painted on the wall of the building, and a crowd of people is gathered back there getting ready for the blast-off. We have the text which was added to this in movie poster style: Pine Ridge to Pluto, rocketing rubes, Lum and Abner with Ben Withers in Plan from Outer Space.